Welcome to the show. I'm Paul, the self-proclaimed tactical historian, and today is the first episode of a series I'm going to call Inside the Muster Room. In the world of law enforcement, the muster room is where we form up at the start of our tour to receive our assignments. However, much to the dismay of our supervisors, it might also be where we like to hang out. So on this series, I'm inviting members of law enforcement to come on the show and give us an inside look into one of the most difficult professions in the world. Today is really special because I'm with Stefhan Bennett. He's a law enforcement officer and founder of Police Coffee. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a real privilege to have you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So if we could just kick it off, when did you come on the job and what made you want to join law enforcement?
Well, since we talked before the show, you're gonna make me feel really old. So I started the job in 1995. Started testing for it in 94. You know how the background process and testing process takes. I came out at a time where it was very difficult to get into law enforcement. A lot of people were competing for very few jobs. In fact, in the area that I work, I showed up at a college campus, auditorium to test with 1,500 people for 40 job openings. I'm like, the odds of that going through, you're sitting in there thinking there's no way. And then you get the phone call, hey, you've completed this part. We want you to move on to the next phase. Yeah, those were exciting times, starting out that young, and things were definitely different. I mean, as a new officer, when I came on, the old timers would be like, oh, things were so different for us. And I really think, they've got a point. I don't know what their experience was like. I've come on, and in my 27 years on the job, I've seen changes occur. And when I see new cops come on, like, oh, you guys don't know how it's going to be. But they don't know what the past was like. And, I think as we progress, we keep continually getting more and more professional, more training, better qualified people in most cases. I think law enforcement is still headed in a good direction.
Absolutely. Although sometimes I've noticed that some of the old timer know-how and traditions that still continue through do help us out, I think, and should be maintained, some things, right?
Definitely. One of my biggest things that I learned from my field training officers at the time was get to know the people in your areas. And we were very beat oriented. I know in the agency you work at, it's very important to know who's in your neighborhood. I've seen that kind of taper off. I work out west, and we have much larger areas to cover, less densely populated. And that being said, when I was new, my FTOs were very much of like, get to know, Bob, who works at the corner store, get to know, the guy that works in the gas station. I mean, you just need to know people in the neighborhood, or that frequent caller, who's got a good heart, the kind of the nosy neighbor who's always calling. Get to know them. They're an asset. Don't treat them like, they're an annoyance. They're actually a benefit to us. And, take time out to talk to these people. I think that's one thing we've started to get away from, is mostly because of staffing issues. It's rush, rush, rush. And we've kind of gotten away from the old community policing, getting to know your people in the neighborhood and actually feeling like you're part of it. Instead, I see guys going call to call to call, and they never really feel like they can slow down. Currently my assignment is handling an international airport. That duty does allow my officers time to interact with the public. And I've started to pull people in that have, started to reach maybe a little bit of a burnout phase out on the road. They'll come into the airport, and within a month, they're a whole different person, because they're interacting with, fellow human beings, answering questions, what's a good place to eat downtown, and really, I think, gets back to the roots of being part of the community that you serve. And I think that's some of that old time stuff. You need to generate those contacts and be approachable with that.
Absolutely. And there are times where my partner and I will actually get out of the RMP, when we're not going from call to call, and just walk, trying to get our steps in. But at the same time, there were a couple people who would walk up to us and say, it's so great to see you walking the beat. I haven't seen that in years. Like, it's great to see you guys out here walking. Did we plan that? Not necessarily, but actually the community likes that. They like to see that.
I think that's where you really build those connections. And like I push that. I know it's trying times for all agencies here in the United States to recruit new officers. Uh, but those staffing shortages just continue to create some of the problems we've continued to see. You know, that burnout affects people's decision-making skills, the fatigue of going call to call to call without getting time to slow down a little bit, you know, breathe. Um, I think some of that contributes to some of these excessive force and other bad decisions we see more frequently, you know, with the exposure we get now with the cameras and everyone filming. You know, it should never have existed anyway. But I think you're capturing more of it. And because we're seeing less and less people on job, call volumes increase, major cities still growing, we're reaching that point of like, we need to get our leaders to make decisions that, you know, we do need to make policing a priority again. We need to show that it's a beneficial job to society, which we all know it is. I mean, I can't imagine, you know, what the U.S. would look like without a law enforcement present to kind of help those people that can't help themselves. I think I think we really need to look at re-emphasizing this profession is a good profession. I think it got kind of demonized over the last few years. And there's so many people now that are like, I would never want to do that job. Look at the scrutiny you guys are under. Instead, you know, 27 years ago, people were beating on the door to get this job and knew that they would make a difference, at least in the communities that they work in.
Absolutely. And, you know, I do think that that opportunity to make that difference is still there. We just have to be better at telling that story and making sure that story gets out there, because that's the truth, right?
It is. And, you know, it's important for our, you know, department leaders and our political leaders to get out in front and really emphasize how beneficial law enforcement is to the communities. And really, they need to showcase their law enforcement agencies. You know, I would say 99.9% of every law enforcement agency is a benefit to the community it serves. And I think we need to see that public support come back. And it's there. It's always been there in the undercurrent, but they're not the vocal ones. And I think it really takes the elected officials to step up, say they support their agencies, demonstrate why they support them, you know, the quality of training that we're getting, you know, the people we're recruiting. You know, contrary to popular belief, we do recruit from all walks of life, all socioeconomic classes, you know, all nationalities. And I don't know that people really recognize that is going on. You know, it's not something that ever really needed to be forced, but they need to see that their communities do represent fairly closely the communities that they serve.
Absolutely. And I mean, you just look at the roll call of, you know, of a platoon today, and the last names are all over the place. I was joking one time, I was walking down the block with a sergeant in my department who was from Colombia, and he was talking to another police officer who was from Bangladesh, and they were both talking and going back and forth, and they were laughing. Now, I couldn't understand what either one of them was saying. They had such strong accents, but they understood and they were laughing. So, you know, it really is. There's a lot of people from all over, all walks of life in this profession. Um, you know, you started talking a little bit about wellness and fatigue and burnout. And that kind of brings up the idea of coffee, which I want to talk about later, because that's a very important part of a police officer's ritual on patrol. But before we get there, I want to bring it back a little bit and talk about your experience when you first joined law enforcement. You know, we often talk about going to the academy and that sort of thing. You didn't have previous military experience or anything like that, right? So
I did not.
what sort of eye-opening experience was this?
So I do come from a law enforcement family. Like my father was in law enforcement in the San Francisco Bay Area for some time, where I grew up as a kid. And so, I mean, I had some familiarity with the job. It was always something that interested me. You know, I can't say with 100% certainty, you know, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a police officer, but it was definitely in my top 10 of where I wanted to go. So, you know, like many of us, we apply for a number of different agencies, you know, to see where we can try and get in. Especially the time I was looking, jobs were pretty sparse. or in the state I work in, you would have to like self-pay your way through an academy for a roll of the dice that you might get hired somewhere. Uh, so I was lucky enough to get hired to an agency that actually puts you through the academy and still allows you to get a paycheck every week so you can still maintain your lifestyle. So I got hired with this agency in 1995, went through the academy, I showed up, and in this case, there were only 10 people in this academy class. Currently, just for reference, our academy classes are typically around 30 to 35 officers, and we do those, several times a year. Smaller than some agencies, much larger than others. That's all relative. So I went through with 10 guys, and at the time we had about a 30% attrition rate of people washing out of the academy. It held true for ours. So of the 10 or 11 people that went through, we lost 3 or 4 of them, and continued on. Majority of my friends have retired. I work with 2 of them that are still here with me. But academy was day one. You're excited to be there. You're excited to wear this uniform. It's like, oh, here's a duty belt. Here's a gun with no bullets. The day one was like Christmas Day. They're handing out goodies. Here's your duty belt. Here's this. Here's that. And you're like, wow, this is great. And day 2 is, okay, we're going to be starting PT, and wait. Now you're running and doing all that stuff. It was, I picture very similar to the military because it does create a bonding experience. It's roughly 4 months of working closely with these other people. And, at the time I was 23 years old. I'm like, I look back, I'm like, man, I really didn't know anything back then. Here we are, a bunch of young idealistic kids that want to make a difference. And I'm thinking, I get, even while I'm going to the academy, I still can't believe that they were paying me to do this job. They're paying me to come in and shoot guns. They're paying me to come in and drive a police car around a track, at high speeds and do all the crazy stuff that I thought was, actual in the movies. You get a chance to, there's pressure on you in the academy. I remember those nights. I'm one of those people that needs to wind down, once I get off work, like especially in the academy, it was like they cram all this information in your head, legal, your policies, what will happen to you if you violate these policies. And we were being tested on it, every week. And if you didn't pass the test, you were going to be looking for a new job. So I remember those nights I get home and I just need to power down. I need to unplug. That's my thing. Like I need to unplug from all the stress of the morning, go out, have a drink, see a buddy, get away from the work thing. I'd come back to my apartment and all I would hear, and this is going to date me again too, all I heard was the clickety clack of a typewriter as my buddy's retyping his notes for the day. I'm like, if I took notes, I don't need to retype them. But he always did. It did pay off for him because he always tested just slightly ahead of me, and retired as a deputy chief for my agency. But great guy. But I just remember he was wound so tight, he'd be home retyping his handwritten notes on a typewriter. And to be honest, that typewriter, I'm glad I don't ever hear that ever again.
You mentioned all of these things that you learn in the academy. I mean, it's a lot. You're expected to be proficient with a firearm. You're expected to be able to drive an RMP at high speeds. You're expected to know all the legal stuff, all the patrol guide stuff, and it's all crammed in there. It's a little different from my experience when I went to basic training as an infantryman. Really, they just kind of broke you down and told you, you put this rucksack on and you're just going to keep walking till I tell you to stop, and that sort of thing. I've noticed, and we talked a little bit about this before, is that police officers really do, I feel like they are almost, they are really truly operators, right? Once they get out on patrol and they have their own steady sector, they have to have this knowledge because they have to make those decisions, and they have a little bit of leeway and discretion of how they handle their jobs. There's a lot of leadership that goes into that. A lot of independence is the word I'm looking for. What do you have to say about that sort of thing?
I think that's one of the best things about this field is that you do have such autonomy. I know when you're an officer or detective on the line, and sometimes you feel like you're being micromanaged. But if we step back compared to some other professions, we're not. Even when we are being, or we have poor leadership that's really, trying to direct every little thing, it's still much more broad authority than other career fields I've seen. I feel like, that autonomy just gives you a lot of responsibility as well. I mean, you can come from, you can come to work one day just expecting to issue a couple parking tickets, and next thing you know, you're involved in a shooting that's going to change your life forever. But that autonomy uh, is an amazing factor that requires us to hire the best people, people with good common sense, people that, and I'm not Mr. Touchy-feely, people that are concerned and caring about the people that they're working for, which is those communities you serve. And always remembering they're there to serve that community and try and make the world a little bit of a better place every day they go out. And I think as long as they go out with that mindset, they're really doing it out of their heart, trying to do the best thing they can. I know I tell my guys, I've done this for years, is, as a supervisor, I will always support you as long as you do these three things. One was what you did legal. Obviously that goes without saying, right? Was it in policy? That's another one that's kind of non-negotiable in most cases. And lastly, was it moral or ethical? And as a good supervisor or leader, I think that's imperative, that if your people meet a standard like that, you have to support them, even if it's not politically correct. You need to stand up for your officers. If they did the right thing at the right moment for the right reason, you need to stand there with them.
That's great though, and it is a very tough job, and a lot of things I would say is that as a police officer, you've got to have a lot of tricks up your sleeve, in the sense of you got to have knowledge about everything, it seems, because not every job you go to is going to have a police solution, right? Sometimes you have to find solutions for jobs that really aren't a police matter, but they're coming up to you asking for help, and you can't really say no. You're a police officer, right?
No, I mean, that's the funny thing about this job, and so much more over the years continues to get piled on us. I know there's, we're looking at different ways to kind of disconnect law enforcement from some of the other issues, but I don't know that we'll really ever get away from it. I mean, one minute, you're a social worker. I mean, our job is about customer service. We're trying to help people. Not everything is lights and siren. Not everything is a foot pursuit. Not everything is a fight with a suspect. I mean, a lot of it is just solving people's problems for them that are not in a position to solve them themselves, whether mentally or physically or just due to circumstances. Oftentimes, we're getting called to deal with even things very simple, neighbor disputes, because two neighbors can't talk to each other, and one's upset that the neighbor's dog barks every night, or we're dealing with people that have difficulty being parents. As a parent, I know that can be difficult. So. I mean, we do have a lot of hats to wear, and we are who people call when they don't know who else to call. I really do like the models that we're seeing now. My agency was one of the first in the nation to start doing a co-responder model with a social worker, which I can I can get behind it, because I think it does benefit. It provides people two options. There's a law enforcement presence there if there's something we can do, but it also gives them an option. Hey, this really isn't a police matter. Here's our social worker. They'll get you hooked up with the services you need. And I think as we start looking at some of those models, I think we can find a good balance on what can be taken away from the police departments, or what the expectations can be. And we can put things where they don't need the police, but they're still safe. Because we had at least one incident where social worker and officer went to the door, a guy came out with a gun, resulted in a officer involved shooting. And we're lucky that no one got seriously hurt beyond the suspect that came out with the gun. Although it is a sad situation, because it is someone that was truly mentally ill, unable to deal with the things that they were dealing with at that time. So, you're going to see the profession change, but I mean, police officers, that's why I signed up for this job, is every day is different. Like I was telling you earlier, as I've moved up through the ranks, there's definitely days I miss just being an officer on the street, interacting with people, and not having to worry about the managerial or the budgetary or directional vision kind of things, where you do get to interact directly with the people you're serving. Because at times, the further up you go, I think you feel a little more disconnected from the community you're serving. I mean, you see it as a whole, but you don't really get that that immediate insight as to what's going on at the ground level.
Right, right. And we talked a little bit about some of this stuff, and you've done a good job of explaining the job. But there are definitely several misconceptions about law enforcement out there. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people tell me, you know, the the budget for the department is too big because they're busy buying tanks. Now, I've never seen my department with tanks, but apparently they're out there, according to some people. So, is there some misconceptions you've heard that you would like to just put to rest?
I think there's a lot. I think people fail to realize that the police officers, and I've been beating this dead horse since we started this conversation, is we're part of the community. We really are. People that get into this profession are very much about caretaking and trying to make people's lives better. We want to remove bad people from the community, put them in timeout. We want people to be safe in their homes, safe in their businesses. We want their property to be safe. We want their kids to be safe, obviously. Some of those misconceptions, especially during those times we've dealt with where there was talk about militarization of the police. I don't know that we ever really became militarized. Gear became better. You see a lot of agencies using the outer body armor carriers, and then they can put some of the gear on there that they were carrying this whole time on their belt. I see some of my guys wearing those, and we'll have citizens come up and say, wow, you're carrying a lot of stuff, are you going to combat? They don't realize that's the same amount of gear that they were carrying on their duty belts the whole time. It just put it up front and center for them to see. But, as far as ergonomics and looking out for the officer's health now, being able to get back to, your precinct or your station, pop that vest off really quick without having to, take your uniform off to get to it, I think is head and shoulders an improvement of where we were before, as well as reducing some back injuries because of the amount of weight you're carrying on the belt. Rifles, tanks. I mean, let's be honest, we've never had any tanks, okay? We've had, armored personnel type vehicles, whether it's a Bearcat or using the government surplus MRAPs. Those things are rescue vehicles, and they should always be identified as such, when discussing these things with the public. Yes, we need these things. Well, why do you need that? Well, if some guy's shooting, we can drive right up, pick up your family member that got shot by him, provide protection and safety to the people that are going to rescue that person, get them in, which goes back to a lot of our problems are self-initiated by our agencies, by our officials, and the fact that we do not do a good job of explaining why we do the things we do. It's critical that police departments get out in front of this. I mean, the days of us, or not necessarily hiding things, but just hey, you don't need to know why we did that. Those days are gone. What we need to do now is we need to get out. The reason our officers carry rifles now in their cars is because of X, Y, and Z. They're more precise. They offer longer range of engagement. It's a tool that is used when needed, not all the time. But when we need it, we can't run back to the station and grab one because time, seconds, those are lives. When we talk about why we use our SWAT teams the way we do, why we train them the way we do, all that information needs to be explained to the public. And we don't need to hide anything. This is why we do it. This is why we respond on robbery calls the way we do. This is why the shooting occurred. Our officers are trained to respond in this way when these circumstances happen. And I don't know if there's been a fear in discussing these matters, but I think they need to come to light, especially the tank thing always makes me laugh in a sense, because although they'll complain that they may look too militaristic because we'll color them in dark colors. Reality is we could paint it pink and put Hello Kitty on the side and it would still serve the purpose we need it to do. Um, and maybe there's some public education on that, because by having these rescue tools, they do save lives. They don't, it's not an occupying force. We don't drive around in them all day. They're brought out for special needs. And when you need them and you don't have one, you've got a big problem.
Right. I think, we speak talking about those vehicles. I think wasn't it in during Hurricane Katrina, for example, that law enforcement wasn't able to get to people because of the flooding, the RMPs couldn't get there. They just didn't have the type of vehicles that could address that condition.
No, I mean, having the right equipment for the area you work in, areas prone to flooding, you should be, I mean, you need appropriate equipment for the areas you work in. Um, you know, you work in a very metro environment, different needs than people working in a rural area with mountainous terrain or needing to go beyond city limits and go into dirt roads kind of situation. So, equipment's critical, but I really do think that the biggest part that police departments do is really need to engage with the communities they work in. Now, I mean, we've got social media now, we've got all sorts of ways to reach out, explain why we do the things we do, why our procedures are set up the way they are. Because people have those questions. I mean, where do people get most of their information about policing, or what do they believe it to be from? TV, right? Law and Order, and what is the
Law and Order, Blue
crime ones?
Bloods, CSI, all of
CSI is
them.
what I was thinking of. They see this stuff and like that's how policing is. Because I always see people tell me, I want to come on the police department and I want to do forensics. For us, that forensics is a non-sworn position, but they're highly trained, highly educated people. And I'm like, it's not the same as on CSI Miami or whatever. I mean, it's a lot of work and you're collecting a lot of evidence and you're spending a lot of time in the lab. I mean, they have a perception. They have the same perception with us getting in car chases and shootouts every day. They don't realize it doesn't really happen very often at all, a few times a year. And with that comes an incredible amount of pressure on the people involved in that: paperwork, legal concerns, moral concerns. I've seen plenty of people struggle after being involved in some of these critical incidents. Did I make the right decision? Did I not? And there's a huge burden that society doesn't see, because what they see on TV is they get a shootout and you're back to work the next day and everything's just fine.
Right.
So I think a lot of that public communication needs to be done, that community engagement in that sense, and not to make excuses for what we do. We do these things because these are time tested and proven. Let's talk about de-escalation. Hot topic word over the last few years, right? But it's been going on since policing started. It's not anything new. Good cops, seasoned officers, have always been the ones that have been able to use their brain and their words to try and reduce a situation. However, there are times that words and talking don't change the outcome. People don't always listen. People don't always act rationally. And I'm one of those people that, yes, there's evil in the world. Some people, it's not mental illness. They are evil in making a conscious decision to do harm to others. Thankfully, there's not many, but they are out there. De-escalation, though, I mean, that has always come with age. I mean, a new cop, all I want to do is run around and take people to jail. I want to get in, scuffles with folks, because it's fun when you're young, I think. Not anymore, because I don't want to get hurt, because it takes longer for me to heal now. But all those things you do at the beginning, as you progress in your career, you learn so much more about human nature and human interaction. And I think when you're like, oh yeah, that guy was really good, the way he talked to that guy when you're new, you'll watch some of these people, oh, you talked to that guy who I thought for sure was going to fight with all of us. What'd you do? Well, I told him that he'd probably, kick my tail, and I didn't really want to fight him and be embarrassed in front of my officer or my buddies here. And oh yeah, you're right. It's a different environment.
Yeah, I think they used to call it verbal judo, right?
I actually got trained in that.
Well, it was, some of those things also goes back to knowing your neighborhood, right? Knowing the people in your neighborhood. I remember one time we got a call for a highly intox EDP, and we got there and the officers were like, oh boy, this guy, he doesn't want to get in the ambulance. It looks like he's going to fight us. And I had been posted on a fixed post for like the first year of my career in law enforcement. I was on that one post every single day. And I knew this guy as the local guy who used to get drunk in front of this one particular address all the time. He was always there. He was homeless and he just sat at that location. And I looked at him and I just said, hey, and I just named the block, and he looked at me and he said, how do you know where I'm from? And after that, that was it. And he got in the ambulance and he was fine. It's just like, you never know, but just talking is one of the best tools you can have, I guess.
It is. I think it comes down to, realizing some of these folks that we deal with are people in crisis. And as I talk about this, you can probably tell I was a hostage negotiator for a long time, because I tend to look at those problems, really all of our problems like that if the person is willing to talk, it gives you time to develop other options. It also means that they're not intent on doing anything immediately, as long as you can keep them uh, going on a positive track.
Now, you did talk about communication within the departments and making sure you communicate with the public because that's very important. Where do you draw the line with OPSEC? I mean, operation security, tactical security, not wanting the perpetrators, the bad guys, these evil people, to know our tactical procedures so they can counter it. I mean, where do we draw the line here?
That's a good question, because my guess is, in the age of the internet, we can probably look up most tactical entry methods, things like that, common practices nationwide. And even if we're not in a tactical community, we can get a good idea of how police are going to respond. Do we lose anything by that? I mean, I don't know. We've moved from dynamic SWAT entries on no-knock search warrants to a majority of the ones that are done now. And I know the National Tactical Officer Association kind of leans towards, we do surrounding call outs, as long as there's no immediate risk to someone inside, like a hostage situation. We do that because we, as a community, have determined that it's not worth risking lives, ours or theirs, to just rush into something. That knowledge is out there. I don't think we should ever be discussing what our actual game plan is at the time the game is happening. But I don't know that there's any issues with debriefing, because I do think most of that knowledge now is publicly available in most areas if you look for it. I don't know if that satisfies that question, but I do think that you can do your best to keep the operational security, and you should. I'm not talking about, we divulge how we do our narcotics operations or other undercover operations, but when you're talking to just raw tactics, it's out there.
Well, you've had a lot of experience with, the tactical side, and you just mentioned, hostage negotiation. So I would love to pick your brain, if you would allow me to, about, some of the recent issues we've had with school shootings and active shooter situations. I know way back we used to teach isolate and contain, and I mean we still use it for EDP situations, but it's different now for active shooters. What's been the change? Do you see departments changing in their tactics in regards to these sort of situations?
I think we've seen a considerable amount of change. The big turning event, I think, for a majority of agencies was what happened in Columbine with the high school shooters. Prior to that, we'd get someone shooting a gun in a location, and like you said, it was contain and wait for SWAT, because they were the only ones trained well enough to go in and take care of this. But I think we forgot the fact that it takes SWAT, for us on a good day, to assemble a team. You're looking at 45 minutes for arrival and getting them clicked up to get inside. 45 minutes is a long time. And, at least one incident in my community, we had a mentally ill individual go into a news station and start shooting up inside. I was a new officer, hear this go in as I'm pulling out my driveway. My agency has take-home vehicles, and people from all over the city are running down to this location. And I think the response was good. We had a lot of officers on scene, but where were they? They were out on the perimeter. We got to contain it and wait for SWAT while this woman's inside shooting this gun off. A bit frustrating, for a new officer, but at the same time, hey, that's what we were trained to do at the time. I think that was just prior to Columbine. Columbine occurred and things started shifting. Reached a point where our level of training was, now we're not waiting. Every officer who is a police officer, if something's happening, your primary goal is to get in, make contact, and try and reduce the threat by either eliminate or containing them to an area, even if that's containing them to an area by shooting your gun at them until more guys get there. For us, it culminated with a shooting we had at one of our local shopping malls, where a gentleman went in with a shotgun and just started shooting people. Our response time was just over 6 minutes from start to finish. From the time the call came in till officers rushed into this place. I mean, just swarmed in. Several officers were able to contain the suspect and then engage him and cease his actions. Unfortunately, even in those 6 minutes of time, I believe somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 people were killed before we could interdict him. But to me, that's the outcome, the best outcome we could have done in a situation like that as law enforcement. I mean, there was no hesitation. The people I saw on scene there that day, brave men and women dedicated to the job, putting themselves at great risk to help other people. For me, I knew there was a store in there where my kids used to like to go, and I'm thinking, oh great, are they home or are they in there? I had to put all that out of my head, get in there, help take care of the problem. So I'm glad that those tactics have increased. Now we've seen some things. I'm still waiting for some news reports to be a little more accurate on some things we've seen recently, because I really hope that officers didn't wait in a situation to go in. I'm not going to point fingers, not going to make a judgment because I don't have the information. But we've seen that at least one other time where the officer was convicted for, not going in on a school shooting situation. I think the one in Florida. I think as police officers, we need to ask ourselves, are we capable of doing, putting ourselves at risk for other people under the right circumstances? And I think if you end up saying no, or I'm too scared, it's probably time to get out before you become a liability to someone else.
One thing that I find very interesting about law enforcement and officers, especially coming from the military into law enforcement, is that I've noticed that law enforcement officers tend to really downplay some of the crazy situations they go into. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I remember, where I work, we've had multiple, gun runs, there's shots fired. And then you'll hear someone go over the air. Okay, we're going to go canvass the building. We're going to go inside this building. They said that witnesses said the man with the gun ran into this building, and we're going to go in and look for that person. I mean, they're literally going into a building where a known person with a gun has just fired their weapon. He will fire it, and he's gone in that building, and they're going to go after him. Regular, and they treat it like this is normal. This is a canvas. This is what we do. One time I was coming in from coming into work, and the boss at the desk, because I was military, asked me, what do you think about all this Ukraine stuff? And I said, yeah, it looks pretty rough out there, And he says, yeah, I don't want any part of that. That's insane. And sure enough, a shots fired job comes over, and he bolted from behind the desk and ran out the precinct to his RMP to go head towards the gunfire. And I thought, here's the guy who just said, oh, I don't want any part of that. And now he's going to the sound of the guns. Someone told me he was actually in special operations, and he teaches tactics to law enforcement around the country now. And he told me, he said, for us in special operations or in the military, we would deploy for a year, come back, get to train, get some R&R, relax. But officers, that's a 20-year deployment, depending on when you retire, right? You're just constantly out there. There's no breaks. Every time you go out, it's not training rounds or simunition. You're still putting live rounds in your gun and a vest on, and you're going out there. I mean, what do you think about that sort of experience, that idea?
I think a lot of us are a little bit crazy for the job we do. I think we do enjoy the excitement and some of that rush we get of getting involved in these somewhat dangerous situations. I also think, especially over my career, I know wellness has become a big issue because the stuff we do like this is mentally taxing. It is physically taxing. It does create post-traumatic stress syndrome for many of us, even if we deny it. Now, I had a friend of mine ask me, how many dead bodies have I seen in my career? And I'd never really given it much thought, but I sat for a few minutes thinking, I have no idea. I've lost count. Hundreds, maybe into the thousands, but probably in the hundreds. And, some were normal natural deaths. Other things were horrible that you can only imagine, watching a horror movie. Uh, I can't say that that hasn't caused me some sort of damage somewhere, to myself. So early on, I mean, we've always had issues with officers. I'm not going to talk to a psychologist. I'm not going to go to therapy. People are going to think I'm nuts. I'm part of the rubber gun squad. I was doing some leadership training at a department in Oregon. Uh, this was probably 10 years ago, maybe. And one of their lieutenants there was bringing up this wellness stuff, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's off his rocker. This is way too touchy feely for me. He doesn't know he's talking about. Cops aren't going to do this. It's not macho enough, or whatever you want to say. It's just it's going to get laughed down." Well, he was right. His stuff was right, and we've seen that change, the acceptance, the need for it, to encourage our officers to use, go to a therapist, talk about the issues before they become a problem. Because, I mean, for years, we've seen officers, substance abuse issues, family issues, infidelity issues that can be tied, a lot of it can be tied to the stress of the job that they're keeping inside, causing them that kind of mental fatigue. I didn't ever think I'd say this, but I'm a huge fan of yoga. I've been a yoga practitioner for 7 years. And my ex-wife dragged me in there one time. I was like, I'm absolutely not going to that. No way, I'll hit the gym, but I'm not going to yoga. Went to yoga, and I've been going there ever since because not only preventing injuries, especially the ones we see in law enforcement, which I think is a great benefit for your back and just overall health, well-being, but mentally it does help you unload some of that day-to-day stress that you get on the job. So some of those things, wellness programs, we're starting to see more and more integrated in the departments, and I think we're starting to see it encouraged. If you feel like they're having an issue, go talk to a therapist. Heck, just go talk to one anyway. It's, empty out that box you're carrying around with you in your head of those things that you don't really need to keep.
Absolutely, agree with all of that. One of the things, I always say is like, you can't keep turning to whiskey and red meat. It's a great Band-Aid, we love it, but you can't keep, it's not the permanent solution. I actually had someone recently tell me they have a program for yoga and meditation. And the way they were able to get it out to military guys and law enforcement guys was they presented it as tactical meditation and yoga, which I thought was funny.
Hey, I do joke that I'm a tactical yogi. Okay, so there's definitely some truth to that.
Well, going into it now, I mean, we've brought all this stuff up, and we're really talking about wellness here. One of those big rituals that we have on patrol, I think, is this connection to coffee. I've heard so many things about coffee. I've heard about cops actually getting in fights when the old timer shows up and finds out that the rookie has found his coffee shop and is going to his coffee shop. That was a big no-no. Other cops have told me that, when two cops get together, sit in a RMP and drink coffee and talk, they could solve all the problems in the world. One time I was told in the precinct that next to the coffee machine, the electricity, the plug started sparking. And the old timer said, well, bring the fire extinguisher closer because the not having coffee is not an option. So, we're definitely going to have coffee. I'm just turning this thing on. So there's a big connection to coffee. So what brings you to coffee? Because that sort of leads us into the next story of your career.
Well, I think you answered that. I'm a cop, okay? I drink coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. Um, I think that that ritual, much like, I mean, we can even go back when smoking was more condoned, and I've never been a smoker, but it's a social ritual, brings people together, gives them time to blow off some steam, gives them time to talk, gets people to slow down. Anytime you're breaking bread with someone or eating, drinking, it slows the pace down a little and gives people time to unwind, share whatever experience they had that day. I mean, I'm sure you've done it plenty of times. You're standing in that coffee shop talking to your buddy. Man, I just was on that call. Did you, can you believe, uh, whatever happened, uh, that moment of sharing creates those bonds. And as you know, in our profession, those bonds are strong, even someone I don't like on the department, I'm always going to support them because they are in my line of work. I'm never going to leave them hanging or treat them differently or not have their back if something bad is happening. Uh, that's a family bond, and that's, I think, unique to military, police, fire. Very close knit professions where we are putting our lives on the line for each other as well as the community. I think those moments to drink a coffee is critical. And I know when I was a new sergeant, it was very common for all the shift sergeants to meet up, from the different sectors of the city, meet up in one of the coffee shops and discuss personnel issues. Hey, can you believe I'm dealing with this? What do you guys think? And usually in those meetings, you have a range of experience. You've got the brand new, everything's still shiny sergeant, and you've got the guy that's been a sergeant for 20 years and loves being a sergeant. You're basically your NCO guy that's just happy right there. Um, those guys are a wealth of information. And I think that is where that knowledge gets shared. The stuff that's not written down, the stuff that's kind of, carried and passed down from generation to generation. It's done, through that rote method of just being discussed or brought up. Because, when you're new in any role, I mean, having someone, even as an officer, you're talking to the old officers, they're giving you information that they've spent their entire careers learning. Now, if we can grasp the pieces that work for us, sometimes we have to clear out some of their biases or their anger towards administration. But these people are a wealth of knowledge, and each one of us brings something to the table on that. New officers have great perspective on things. They're not conditioned to the same thinking the rest of us have been. So I do think that coffee ritual is critical on a number of levels. Um, as far as drinking coffee, I do drink a lot of it. In fact, I drink so much, I decided to start a coffee company.
Well, so I would love to get into that. You start this coffee company. It's great. I love it. I mean, I've actually tried it. I love the coffee. There are some great names for the different roasts. We can bring that up here in a second. But how did that actually get its physical start? Like, what was the plan there?
So back in 2017 is actually about the time for me the idea came up. All of us who work in the law enforcement business are always looking for a side hustle of one or another. Um, so I was thinking coffee. I mean, there was like, we really, I thought there was an opportunity to make a police branded coffee that, people who support law enforcement would be interested in. Um, it'd be super great quality coffee, and give me something to look at if I can build it up to do after retirement. I also went into it thinking that it would be beneficial, to give back to the community we serve. So I actually had reached out and partnered with Concerns of Police Survivors. It's a charity that supports families of those officers that lost their lives in the line of duty. Great organization. As I was searching for some of these different charities, I really looked at where the bottom dollar went, because I've seen a lot that they'll take, for every dollar that comes in, 80 cents goes to their maintenance fees or, paying their employees, whatever. So you're getting like 10 cents to the end user that really needs it. Concerns of Police Survivors, phenomenal organization. I want to say it's close to like 92 cents of every dollar gets to the end users, the families that need it. Very impressed with their integrity and their desire to, it's not about making money for them, it's about getting it to the families that need it. With that being said, 2017, kind of kicked the idea around, didn't feel like it was the right time. I do have a friend that's in the coffee business, who's actually one of my partners on this, and we've discussed it then, kind of let it go by the wayside. Well, come to 2020, and what happens? You know, we're dealing with defund the police, we're dealing with riots, we're dealing with incredible demonization of the police departments as a whole. And I'm just watching people getting demoralized. And I thought, you know, this is probably the time to really push this out. People that support it, we can help officers that have paid that ultimate sacrifice as well. And we pressed forward. So around September, October of 2020 is when we went live. Came up with our goal of getting great quality coffee, especially because cops, we're coffee junkies. Yes, in a pinch, I'll drink whatever's at the corner store, you know, on a late night homicide or something. But if I have my choice, you know, I want something that's fresh roasted, that I just ground before I put it in the coffee maker, depending on which way you want to go. I mean, there's a whole gamut on that. We can get into that too if you want, but that's kind of how it formed. I mean, really good quality. We're still at the size that, you know, if you order coffee, your coffee was probably roasted maybe 3 days before it got shipped to you or less. So it's still incredibly fresh coffee. We do some of the best quality beans you can buy. We use the ties that my partner has made with various people in Costa Rica. We do a lot of Costa Rican coffee as well as Colombian and some Brazilian.
That's fantastic. You know, I think about, like you said, you know, my partner and I would visit every small bakery / coffee shop in our sector because we had to pay homage to everybody, you know, talk to the community. But then I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And I was like, why am I not sleeping? And then I remembered, oh yeah, I drank 7 espressos today because I went to each coffee shop. And I love the names of the coffee. So I just wanted to bring up the names because this is really, some of these are great. We've got bourbon. Is that new?
Okay. So originally, I'm kind of not a huge flavored coffee fan, but we were getting so many demands or interest in like, hey, you're gonna do a flavored coffee. We started doing them, and we're gonna do them on random bases. You know, they're gonna be short, limited time only kind of things. For example, our first one was raspberry chocolate donut. Cops, donuts, coffee, right? The whole stereotype goes together. Really good response on that one. From there, we've done, I know we did s'mores, a flavored one. We also, this was one of my favorites, is for St. Patrick's Day, we did Paddy Wagon Blend, which was an Irish cream flavored coffee, which had really,
you might
really
have
good
to
results.
explain that one. Some people might not get Paddy Wagon.
so let's see that there. So that in the old days, in some large cities still, the officers that make the arrest don't necessarily take the person to jail. They have a unit come, usually in a van. Back in the day, it was one of these wagons. Paddy could be considered not a very nice term for Irish people, but it seems to be well received. They used to call these paddy wagons, and they would pick the arrested party up and take him to jail. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing to name it Paddy Wagon on St. Patrick's Day.
Well, one of my favorite things is the first time I heard the term Paddy Wagon was coming out of a Colombian sergeant mouth with its thick accent. I just thought that was funny, you know. But one of my favorites here, and I don't drink decaf, but defunded decaf. I mean, that's a good one.
That one definitely was tongue in cheek, right? As we saw the defund movement push through. I'm not a huge decaf fan. I know there's plenty of people that do need to, you know, if they're going to drink it at night so they can get to sleep, or people with medical conditions that the caffeine can cause them some harm. Definitely like it. It's a fantastic quality coffee. I obviously have tasted everything we have, and aside from the lack of caffeine, the taste is as good as everything else we have. We did do that picture. I don't have it handy, but
I'll post it up.
it's an officer with his arms up, and I know some of the NYPD guys wrote me and were like, was this did you guys do this because of one of our chiefs taking a knee at one of the events? And I'm like, art is in the eye of the beholder, but no, that was not what we did. It was just the frustration of being a police officer and dealing with the defunding. It's an officer with his hands up in the air. Uh, I'll tell you guys, we based it on Willem Dafoe sticking his arms up in Platoon,
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
and just kind
Classic.
of that frustration. So we threw that on there. Um,
Sort of
yeah,
poignant considering the scene, with them flying away from them.
it was, and it was a sad time we went through there. So I felt some humor as we went on with this would help bring people's spirits up a little bit. What was really good about starting this company is the response we got. There's so many people. If you look at our Facebook page, look at the comments people put on there. There's so many people that love and support their police departments. We actually had a lot of people buying coffee for their local departments and bringing it in for them, which is just awesome. Running a business, it was bad enough having one full-time job that was typically a 60-hour-week job. Now I have two full-time jobs, running a small business and keeping it afloat. We've been going for a year and a half now, and I'm pretty happy with the direction things are taking.
What's the future? Are you going to come up with some more flavors?
Absolutely. We're always going to, this was always my favorite, is our Back the Blue blend. That's my favorite so far. My favorite to drink, though, shouldn't tell you guys all my favorites, but my favorite is our Operator blend. It's a dark roast. So in my coffee experience, coffee's much like wine and bourbons and whiskeys. There's different flavors. For non-coffee drinkers, they just think it's mud water or whatever. But there's definitely different notes and textures and smells to the coffee. I used to be a light roast drinker. Light roast, if you don't know, is actually the highest caffeine content. So if you get a light roast, you're probably getting more caffeine than any other. The problem that I have with light roast is it's a little bit higher on the acidity, so you get that kind of citrusy taste in your mouth. Well, I jumped to our dark roast after trying our dark roast. I never really drank dark roast before, and now I can't get away from it. So dark roast, a little bit less caffeine, but much less acidity. And actually our dark roast reminds me of Guinness, which I can't drink on duty, but I do drink when I get home. And it just keeps me, takes that edge off, so I can get my Guinness when I get home.
That's
But
fantastic. I mean, I love it. Like I said, you sort of mentioned this thing about the cops and side hustles, and now you're kind of running this business. I mean, do you have any tips for cops who are trying to do something, on the side, whether it's something that they want to supplement their income or just a hobby to keep their mind off, crazy work?
I mean, it's work. Don't ever think it's going to be easy. Part of it is having that vision of where you want to go, much like police work and leadership there. If you start your own business, you're a leader, and you're whatever you've started, you are that leader in that group. Have a game plan, have an idea of where you want to go. And you know what? It doesn't hurt to try. Okay. My intention with this was like, hey, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to give it my 100%. If it doesn't work out, I tried. And the statistics on starting a new business are daunting, right? How many new businesses fail in the first year? So like when we hit that year mark, I'm like, yes, we're still afloat. We're still moving forward. I'm not rich. I'm still haven't retired yet. And, I'm not writing as big a checks as I would like to yet to Concerns of Police Survivors. But I know those days are coming, and I know that it's going to continue to grow. And so I think you need to have that vision of where you want to take your product or idea. I mean, even if it's building fences or decks for people, I know we've got people that do all sorts of things. Fire departments have been doing this for years. These guys have construction jobs on the side and run these other businesses. I know we should have been firefighters, right? But who knew? too late now.
Well, I always make fun of firefighters because one of my buddies, he's a firefighter, and when he told me when he was a probie, what they used to do is, you come to the firehouse and you'd have to mop and clean and polish, and I was like, well, when you're a rookie cop, they just throw you the keys and go, get us out of backlogs, start answering jobs, go do your job. I mean, so we're workers, man, we're workers.
Yeah, I just think that for officers that want to do something, look at what you want to do, see how you can fit it into your schedule. Don't ever think it's going to be easy, and it's one step at a time. It's that whole how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You're not gonna you probably aren't going to hit it big overnight. It's that steady pace, that consistency, the endurance that's going to get you to cross that finish line.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your wisdom. I would love to have you back on the show just to answer some questions, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who listen to this and they're going to have more questions. So I really appreciate your time. Last but not least, though, how can people get access to your coffee? I mean, where can they go to learn more about you and the coffee?
So if they jump on the internet and look at policecoffee.com, it's a police coffee company, but our website is policecoffee.com. We also have a great Facebook page, which like I said, I like to go to and look at the comments that get on there. Occasionally I'll answer them personally. There's just, it really reinvigorates me on the job, knowing that there are people out there that fully support us and recognize the sacrifices and risks we make every day. But yeah, if they jump on policecoffee.com, they'll get on the website, and they can experience some of the best coffee we've got. We do offer, let me give you a quick couple tips on the coffee. If you're a coffee aficionado, buy our whole bean coffee. Grind it at home per use. Don't grind the whole bag right away. What a lot of people don't know is you buy ground coffee, and yes, ours is super fresh when you get it. It immediately starts oxidizing once if you've bought pre-ground coffee, so it starts losing a little bit of flavor. And if you did a back-to-back comparison, fresh ground, you just ground it there, to just about anyone could tell the difference. So I always recommend whole bean and then grind it at home. We do offer K-Cups for those inconvenient times where you just got to pop it and go. So we do have that for those that just need their caffeine fix and a decent tasting coffee. We also do a hot cocoa. I don't know, of course we're approaching summer now, but once winter hits again, we've got 5-0 cocoa, fantastic stuff. You can also mix it with your coffee if you want, get a little mocha flavor going. But really, if you can, go with our whole bean and grind it at home. You'll be impressed.
I'm definitely a whole bean person myself. I always grind my own coffee. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm definitely going to put links in the description so people can access everything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.